Hello and welcome to Commodity Champions. I'm Manisha Gupta. With election verdict out, BJP-led NDA is busy chalking out their future course of action and, most importantly, the allocation of ministries. After BJP-led NDA witnessed a major drop in rural India from 229 seats to 29 in 184 seats in 2024, the talk on rural distress is back on table. Also, the need to concern, or rather the focus on concerns of rural India, thus getting the right set of administrators to head ministries like agriculture, rural infrastructure and Jal Shakti can play a critical role for the new government. Other than inflation, fixing slowdown in consumption and consumer sentiment in rural and unemployment will be some of the things to watch out. To discuss the future course of action of the new government, we are now joined by former Agriculture Secretary Siraj Hussain. Also joining us on the show is Agri expert Devinder Sharma and Shree Renuka Sugar's Atul Chaturvedi. Gentlemen, hi, thank you so much for joining us. It has been quite a hectic last 1 week as we've been looking at numbers and, of course, analyzing it. But now is the time that the ministries are going to be allocated soon. And Agri has been one sector which clearly has seen more of a pain here. The rural expectations were on the higher side and we haven't really seen that gone through. Mr. Hussain, first to you then, what is your sense? How do you read? And what would you say went wrong, especially in the rural India? Because we've seen those numbers come in either whether it has been from Maharashtra, from Punjab, Haryana, even Western UP for that matter.
Thank you, Manisha. You see, elections are too complicated to attribute a single factor to the victory or defeat of a political party, especially a political party which has complete domination over the narrative, complete domination over media, especially electronic media, etc., etc. So we cannot say that it is because of rural distress alone that farmers in Western UP or in Maharashtra have voted against BJP, because the farmers of Madhya Pradesh seem to be fully satisfied with BJP. And the farmers of Odisha also seem to be satisfied. So that is one point. The second point is that, as I wrote in my piece in Mint yesterday, I think the farmers, the rural people, the poorer classes of India, the artisans, the working classes feel quite awkward when they hear that we have become fifth largest economy and our GDP is so high and so on, because it is not reflected in their life. And therefore, keeping these factors in mind, I think going forward, the government will have to come up with policies to help out these people, not only get better of the distress which has been caused by various factors, but also to give them some assistance to cope up with the food inflation and with other expenditure on health, etc., which has been rising.
Well, absolutely. I will come to the fact or to the point and discussion on what really needs to be done from here, what can be expected from the government as well, because more and more people, and especially rural India, has been very vocal in the last couple of days and speaking their mind out on this one. Mr. Sharma, this one is to you as well. First of all, trying to understand on what, according to you, really went wrong when it comes to rural India.
Well, I think the verdict, as far as the rural India is concerned, is on livelihood issues. And people, whether they are farmers or whether they are, farm workers or other wage earners, they have had a terrific time in the sense that while the income of every community or every section was increasing or growing up, and we were becoming or heading towards a third largest economy, and whereas the poor people realized that their income had remained stagnant or on the decline. Even official data tells us that for the last 10 years, the wages have declined in the rural areas or remain almost stagnant. I think it's quite a clear call. And somehow we tend to ignore all the issues of rural India, thinking that the kind of polarization that has taken place in this country will take care of the rural distress or the voting pattern in those areas where rural distress is at the peak. And that did not happen this time. And that, I think, is a clear-cut message that if the government, even now, the NDA government, the coalition government that has come into power, doesn't look at the farming issues, I think they should be willing to sit in the opposition in 2029. That message is very loud and clear. According to what you have been flashing on the screen, it is quite clear that the rural constituencies have increasingly voted for a change, and I think that is quite evident.
It clearly is. Yes, there are concerns there. And NDA 3.0 is something that the street will be watching very closely on in sense of what really can be expected from this one. But as I said, before we get on to this, I would also need your views, Mr. Atul Chaturvedi, on what you think went really wrong with the kind of voting decline, the numbers decline that we saw from rural India. Well, yes, there has been some farmer distress that we've seen, rural distress in that sense as well. And, you know, whether it has been the farmers of Punjab or Haryana or Western UP where we've seen numbers really decline, or Maharashtra where onion was a major factor here. What do you think went really, really wrong right now?
Oh, I'm so sorry I was not able to connect. So I have to go through with the telephonic this one. But I've not heard what the other panelists said, but the fact remains that rural India was definitely aggrieved. And in fact, what I was reading in the newspapers last couple of days is that almost 38 to 40 constituencies actually voted against the ruling party, essentially because of the rural distress. And what we've seen is that the bias in the last 6-8 months has been terribly in favor of the urban population and at the cost of the rural India. Every day you would be listening that onion export banned, rice export banned, rice bran extraction banned, and this banned and that banned, and imports of edible oils at practically zero duty, affecting the mustard farmers. All these things put together was bound to send the wrong message to the farmers. And probably that's one of the reasons why I think Rajasthan, Punjab, Western UP, the farmers there possibly have given a message that you can't take us for granted.
We did.
So,
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Hussain, this one is to you then, you know, because second week of June is when we usually see the MSP come in as well. So MSP is another thing that the industry is waiting for. But as we've seen in the last couple of years, while the MSP hikes have continued, so have the cheaper imports into the country as well. And that is something that the farmers have not liked.
Yes, actually, in case of edible oils, one reason why the mustard farmers this year in the initial part of the year did not receive the MSP were very cheap imports, and the Solvent Extraction of Extractors Association of India and other export bodies have been requesting the government to increase the duty. You see, but I must say that the government has to do a very fine balancing act between managing food inflation and managing the income of the farmers. So I think this balance needs a very agile action by the government ministries, keeping in mind the trends in global prices and trends in domestic prices, so that both the interests are protected as far as possible. Now, it was a very amusing scenario that export of onion from Gujarat was allowed, while export of onion from Maharashtra was banned. So I think going forward, the government would have realized that centralization of policy making is not a good idea. And it is better to decentralize these powers to a group of ministers who can then meet more frequently, maybe every week, and take action on adjusting tariffs. And it is not only tariffs. There are several other things. I think Mr. Sharma will talk about that.
Mr. Sharma, coming to you and taking over from what Mr. Hussain said, I also want to add to the fact that doubling farmers' income as a theme really did not materialize. We did not see those numbers coming in. And the second point really is that the farmers' debt levels in various states continued to increase. Do you think that was yet another reason?
Well, I think that was the primary reason. And let's be very clear, if the farm incomes are at the bottom of the pyramid, what do you expect farmers to do? I mean, they have been protesting. They have, as we all know, they had the iconic farmers protest around New Delhi. Even now, they are sitting on a protest at the borders of Haryana, and the government is simply not concerned. This government is not simply concerned. So, you know, what more can you expect these farmers? So they exercised their vote and gave the verdict very clearly and loud and clear, I would say. I think let's be very clear. The OECD has come out with a report a few months back, and it has said that since the year 2000, before 2000, they were not doing the calculations to know how much is the kind of a support that farmers get in different countries, which is exactly in 54 countries or the 54 major economies. And the study tells us very clearly that Indian farmers are the only community across the world where farmers have been incurring losses year after year since the year 2000. Is anybody bothered? Did any discussion take place in parliament or in the media or anywhere else? So that's the kind of a contempt we have for the farming community. And they expressed, all the best thing they could do was to exercise their vote and show that we are pained. And I think that kind of a, realization must happen in this country, that farmers cannot continue to survive at the bottom of the pyramid. And now the problem here is when we try to balance out between consumers and the farmers, we forget or we don't realize that farmers are also consumers. The producer in India is also a consumer. If he doesn't get adequate income in his hand, how do you think he will consume? And that is why we know what is happening in the rural areas. The demand that we talk about in the rural areas has remained almost static over the last few years. Now, I think this has to be addressed, and I hope the new government and the political parties who are party to that government will at least focus their attention to how to raise farmers' income. And one of the ways to do is to ensure the right kind of export-import policies. That's one way, but I think why not now at least pick up the courage to go ahead with the Swaminathan Commission's recommendation of guaranteeing a price which is by the comprehensive cost plus 50% profit. That is what Swaminathan suggested, and that is what the farmers have been demanding. The time has come now. Of course, we know that mainland economists had created a kind of a fear psychosis that the government will not be able to take on the burden and so on. But I'm glad CRISIL itself came out with an analysis saying that the additional burden would be only about 22,000 crores per year. The seventh pay commission had the additional burden was about 4.5 lakh crore across the country. Nobody raised a question. But if you have to spend money for farmers, everyone is up in arms saying, where will the money come from? Of course, it will come from the same kitty from where the money for seventh pay commission came. The fact of the matter is we have a kind of a bias against the rural areas. We have a kind of a bias against farmers. And I think sooner the better if the governments can realize that and take corrective actions or corrective measures. And let us not be swayed by the mainland economic thinking that, leave farmers to the markets and markets will see that the farmers' income goes up. As I have said everywhere that farmers' income across the world, markets have failed to increase or enhance farmers' income, whether it is America, whether it's European Union, or whether it is India. So when markets have failed, I think it is time for the government to step in and ensure that farmers get a kind of a living income that they need. So what is wrong in that? And I think the nation has to realize that if you have to become Viksit by 2047, you have to take farmers along. You cannot leave them behind. After all, they are 50% of the country, which means about 700 million people are dependent on agriculture.
Oh, yeah, 700 million people are dependent on agriculture, and this is an area or a sector which clearly has shown its distress by the way it has voted. Mr. Chaturvedi, this one is to you then. Poor yields, fluctuating commodity prices, not too much investment from corporates in sense of research are some of the other factors which we have seen being talked about yet again. How much do you think needs to be really done? I mean, we've seen Mr. Sharma give so many points out on what really has been going wrong, and we clearly can't be left at market forces.
No, my take is that jacking up minimum support prices alone and not having an ecosystem of managing whatever the government is procuring may not be the solution. You can keep jacking up the minimum support price. Look what happened in mustard. The minimum support price was already there in place. And even though we have a reasonably good ecosystem by way of NAFED and HAFED being operational, still the the mustard was selling much below the minimum support price. So I think somebody has to have the commercial intelligence also that if the crop is getting marketed, it is important that the edible oil import duty should be suitably tweaked to ensure that you don't have to keep defending the minimum support price in the marketplace. One is that. And secondly, I don't think we have an ecosystem for managing control of or buying all the pulses which are produced in this country. So we'll have to devise a system which ensures that the market forces ensure that the farmers get a reasonable price. And the other thing which I thought is important is that we have not done too much of an homework on productivity. Our problem in the rural areas essentially is the land holdings are getting smaller and smaller. So you can't do much about that, but you can certainly do something on the productivity front. Now, technological intervention we've been talking about for ages. Genetically modified seed, as far as mustard is concerned or as far as soya is concerned, is still hanging around. And we are jolly well consuming edible oil, which is largely genetically modified. And we are also consuming cotton seed and whatever. And the milk, which probably is coming to us, is also genetically modified in an indirect manner because the cattle is being fed GM cotton. So all these things, I think, is important that we need to take a commercial view also to ensure, and all this flip-flop which is happening, onion export ban, rice ban extraction ban, rice ban, all these things send wrong signals. So I think it's important that,
Yeah, maybe a long-term view on a sustainable policy perhaps would do the job. And I get your point there. I was talking to some people in cotton farmers, and they said for the longest time there has been no change in cotton seeds therein. They're obsolete. They're not changing as per the climate is changing, and the shortage of good seeds is something that perhaps could really impact cotton sowing this time around. So that's another thing that I seem to be hearing from the markets there. But gentlemen, do stay on with us. We'll stop for a very short commercial break right now. But when we come back, we do want to understand from all of you on what is this that this government will need to do. What is that top 5-point agenda, which really is a must do at this point in time when it comes to rural India, after this very short break.